The following lesson is linked to Learning Outcome 2, Reading and Viewing. It addresses the assessment standard that requires learners to recognize how language and images may reflect and shape values and attitudes. Learners should be able to recognize the nature of bias, prejudice, and discrimination in texts.
Hello, welcome. I'm Nicola Shongwe. In this series of lessons, we have been developing our skills of reading between the lines. In today's lesson, we're going to look at how journalists choose who to quote and where those quotations are placed within the articles. You may think that quotations are objective because the person's exact words are being used. However, there are many ways that quotations can be reported so that the truth is distorted. If you are aware of how to read between the lines when you come across a quotation, you will become a more critical reader who is far less likely to be taken in by somebody else's version of the truth. By the end of this lesson, you should be able to identify who is quoted and comment on the context of a quote. Have a look at the following cartoon. I'm sure it portrays a common argument that happens in many homes. Wife says, "It's almost midnight. Where have you been?" Husband says, "I worked late. I'm presenting a report to the board and it had to be perfect." Wife says, "Well, you should have called." Husband says, "I'm sorry, honey. I just lost track of time." Wife says, "I swear if you do this to me again, I'll kill you." Imagine a journalist overheard this conversation. Now, if he was looking for something sensational to report, a simple domestic squabble like this would hardly be newsworthy. But by choosing which information to report, he could come up with a headline like this. Wife tells husband, "I'll kill you." Yes, these are the wife's actual words, but in the context of the conversation, we could have worked out that perhaps she was angry with her husband because he hadn't phoned her, or because she had been inconvenienced. But she certainly was not about to murder anybody. She may have said the words, "I'll kill you," but this was not a real threat. If you think about it, how many times do people say, "If you do that, I'll kill you"? But actually they don't really mean it. At least we hope not. Journalists may only report part of a quotation, or they may not explain the circumstances surrounding it. When this happens, the quotation is out of context. What is important to note is what is quoted. On the other hand, if the article was an opinion piece about wives who nag, the journalist could have lifted out information that would have made it seem that all the wife does is nag, complain, and threaten. It could have looked something like this. Wives question and threaten hard-working husbands. The focus is shifted away from the husband who came home late without phoning to the wife who always seems to complain and nag. Just as it is important to look at what is quoted, it is important to note who is quoted. If the journalist has only included quotations from people on one side of the argument, the report will not be balanced and objective. Ideally, people from both sides of the argument should be given an equal opportunity to express their views. In the last lesson, we learned that journalists tend to put information that they agree with first to highlight it, and information that they feel is not so important towards the end. Well, the same applies to quotations. Look at who is quoted first. Journalists know that many people don't read to the end of an article. This means that most of those people read only what the journalists want them to read. Next, we have to look at the status of the person being quoted. Quotes from people who have status, authority, or expertise on an issue are more believable. This is why police departments, hospitals, large companies, and government organizations have spokespeople. These people are able to give the official version of what happened rather than a view given by employees or passers-by. Of course, you need to be careful that the official version is really the truth. Reading between the lines is a tricky skill to master because there are so many components to it. The best way to develop this skill is by practicing it. So let's look at another example from the Sunday Times. This is how it begins. Teacher accused of killing boy 8 by banging his head. Here we see that a teacher is being accused of killing a boy, but we don't know who is doing the accusing. If we were told that the investigating officer or a medical doctor believes that the teacher is to blame, do you agree that this accusation would then carry more weight? As it stands, we don't know who says this. It could be a distraught mother who, in her grief, is trying to find someone to blame. This would not carry as much weight as that of a medical expert, for example. To see who is doing the accusing, we will have to read on. 8-year-old Skhumbuzo Mamela died last Sunday, and his teacher is facing a murder charge after allegedly knocking Mamela's head against the heads of 3 classmates after they made a noise. This extract makes use of the word alleged. The teacher allegedly knocked the boy's head. This word is used all the time in news reports because someone has been accused of being in the wrong, but their guilt has not yet been proven. This way, if it eventually is established that the accused person is actually innocent, the newspaper has not falsely accused anyone. Let's get back to the article. We still haven't established who has accused the teacher. One of his classmates alleged that the bubbly grade 2 pupil had had his head knocked on Thursday at Bulwer Primary School. Here we have a statement by a witness, another child in the classroom. Do you think that a grade 2 pupil's opinion of what happened is valid? Well, whilst you can't assume that the learner is not telling the truth, if an adult or person in authority, such as the principal, had witnessed the event and described it, the quote would hold more weight with the reader. This account of what happened is also placed at the beginning of the article, so this information is foregrounded. The journalist then goes on to quote the child's mother. When Sithole, the child's mother, got home, she said Skhumbuzo wanted to spend time with her instead of his friends. He just wanted to sit beside me. He was weak and had difficulty eating. By quoting the mother, the reader is encouraged to see the event through her eyes. This appeals to our emotions, and we're led to think how terrible it must be to see one's child like this. Notice also that her words are foregrounded. This is the first bit of direct speech in the article. In fact, she is the only participant to be quoted directly. This lends more importance to what she has to say. We don't have time to read the whole article, but the mother goes on to describe the boy being taken to hospital and his subsequent death. The article ends with, "The school was shut when a Sunday Times team visited it. Teachers and the principal stood outside the school gates refusing to comment. Education spokesman Mandla Msibi said the law would be allowed to take its course." Nowhere in this article does the teacher get to give her side of the story. As an uninformed reader, you may simply read this and not question it, or even assume that the teacher is guilty. But when you read between the lines, you know that who is not quoted is as important as who is. You may wonder, was the teacher advised not to speak to the press? Does she feel guilty or remorseful? Or maybe she feels she's not responsible. Note how an official spokesman has been brought in to give the official account. You may wonder why the education department is not defending the teacher. Maybe they want to distance themselves from this event so that the reader is left blaming the teacher rather than the department. In this lesson, we have looked at extracts from a newspaper article. You may want to write down the following points as we recap. The article tells us that a boy died. His teacher allegedly knocked his head. The article quotes the mother. There are comments made by a classmate. And there are comments from the Department of Education. Here's your task for this lesson. Write an article that foregrounds the version of events according to the teacher. Well, that brings us to the end. I hope that this series of lessons helps you to become a more critical reader. Don't believe everything you read, especially if you have not very carefully read between the lines. Goodbye.